I need some traction. You need some traction.
So,
Hello.
all right,
Hey.
come on down.
Good evening, everybody.
Excellent. Growth and understanding.
Oh, look, that's us.
Wow.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Wow, and we just found out that we are between you and happy hour, so
Apologies.
we'll be quick.
High-risk situation right here.
So hi, everybody. My name's Alexis Johnson, and I run customer success at Enterana. And what that really means is that I get to spend all of my time thinking about different data problems for all of our customers, and specifically thinking about behavioral patterns in event data. Because Enterana is a full-stack solution built for event data in particular. And event data is really just information about actors and timestamps. So this could be a device and you're looking at something like an app install. It could be a user clicking through a website. And the individual items that someone does or the clicks on a web page may in and of themselves may not be interesting. And most of our customers are really focused on how do you think about how those events string together in sessions, in patterns of behavior. So that's really what we're going to talk about today. I'm sitting here with Joe Gallagher from Reddit and James Senior from Microsoft, and I'll let you guys introduce yourself, and then we'll chat about growth and data.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Hello, everyone. My name's Joe. I lead data at Reddit. And for those of you who don't know, Reddit is it's a place for communities. It's a place where people go to learn about history, to talk about sports, to talk about cooking, to get tips on what restaurants to go to in Vancouver. If you are interested in anything, there's a community for you on Reddit, and if it doesn't exist, you can create it and start meeting people who share those interests regardless of time zone or geographical boundaries. What this leads to is 230 million monthly users and across about 45,000 communities every month. And I am in the very, very fantastic position of helping Reddit understand its data and helping people within Reddit tell the story of Reddit with data.
Nice.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. James Senior. I work at Microsoft down in Seattle area. Work on the OneDrive team, which is our cloud storage product and platform that comes as part of our Office 365 suite of services. My job is we actually lead a team called the growth team in the OneDrive team. So we're kind of responsible for spearheading a lot of our growth initiatives, how we think about building a loyal customer base, hopefully getting people to pay us money through the process of that as well, which would be nice. And then also, spending a lot of time looking at data, insights, understanding how the product is used and how to improve it. So I'm excited to be here and share the stage with these guys.
Excellent. So to start us off, let's talk a little bit about growth. And I'm going to ask each of you, how do you think about growth at Reddit and Microsoft?
Yeah, growth at Reddit is, because of the fact that Reddit is many things to many different people, we don't have like one single growth metric that we're targeting. It's as much about new users as it is about new communities, as well as existing users finding new communities they're going to fall in love with. So for us, we use data to try and understand the journeys that users go through when they're trying to find that community that they're going to fall in love with and that they want to come back to every day. As much as we've started to try and understand what sort of a life cycle and what sort of a journey do communities themselves go through as they try and grow and become this place for people to go and get great content and have great discussions. So as much as we care about uniques and like the kind of classic growth metrics, we also care deeply about helping existing users grow their engagement and grow the amount of, I suppose, fun and enjoyment they can get from Reddit.
So it's interesting. Microsoft is an interesting company to work for right now at the moment. So I joined about 9 months ago, kind of a bit of a history, and then I was out doing a few startups and a digital agency doing random projects for about 2 or 3 years, and then I was actually at Microsoft before that. And so I kind of came back. And I didn't think I would actually come back to Microsoft, but something changed, and that was kind of mainly the CEO and kind of a new outlook on how the company builds products and focuses on what's called growth mindset at the company. So there's a lot of top-down culture being put in place by the CEO, and kind of that provides the kind of support to actually drive the right kind of attitude around building products. And so when you get down to the level of product teams, like for example in OneDrive, people are striving for that kind of growth mindset. And what underpins that is basically learning as quickly and as fast at high quality as possible. And being able to experiment, being able to try new approaches, not being afraid or kind of constrained by the status quo or what has been in the past. And our team is kind of in place right now as the growth team, but our goal or mission is really to become redundant. Because as we start to see that culture permeate a little bit more through the organization and through the other product teams, which are within the feature teams within OneDrive, we've been successful when growth is just part of everyday life and people are completely comfortable with experimenting, with changing things, with trying out new processes and tools and features and value for customers. So it's kind of an interesting time to be at the company, and I think that's kind of reflected in some of the things that we're doing and the way that the market looks at the company as well, and our customer base.
Can we drill in there, and can I follow up and say, how does behavioral analytics specifically help your learning and growth?
Yeah. So how do you define behavioral analytics, first of all? I think I'll ask a question back to you.
Fair enough, and for me, I think it really is about patterns of behavior or patterns that we see in the kind of event data that we're looking at.
Yeah. So behavioral analytics for us is just part of a broader kind of toolkit that we have as product managers. This is part of what we're trying to kind of roll out across the organization, so that depending on the task or the job you're doing, you just have the right tool at the right time. And whether that's kind of long-range dashboards where you can track kind of key business metrics like MAU and DAU and all those kind of main kind of corner posts of a business and usage, or it's behavioral analytics where an individual product manager and an engineering team are looking at a cohort of users and trying to understand what their patterns are, why they're behaving in certain ways. And that's kind of the key, actually, the why. It's kind of not just looking at events and kind of what is going on, but it's quickly deriving the why it's happening, so then you can make an action upon that data. And so that's kind of the way we think about it. And we have a bunch of tools that we use to do that, and Interana is kind of one of those tools that helps us to get to the why on a huge data set with many hundreds of millions of users, and so it's super helpful.
And Joe, can you talk a little bit about how you think about data and behavioral analytics across your organization?
Yeah. So Reddit's pretty tiny in terms of headcount compared to Microsoft. So we've about 130 people. And when I joined, what we wanted to do was try and find a way for everyone in the company to get value from data, whether you're on the sales team or whether you're on our trust and safety team or you're in product or in engineering. So that's why the mission of the data team or the data organization at Reddit is very much about helping everyone in the company tell a story with data. So often when you kind of make a request to the data team or we start talking, the first thing we'll say back to you is, well, what's the story you want to tell? What do you really want to say? Because everybody has some hidden agenda that they're not telling you about, because they're like, hey, I want to get this done, or this is the thing I want to launch. And if you can kind of make a promise and make a bet with someone who wants to do analytics or wants to do data science, is, hey, if you can turn over all the cards and tell me everything you know and every place you want to go, I guarantee you that if we partner up on this, we're going to have a far better experience. So for behavioral analytics or any kind of analysis of data, we always want to know what that story is and what that narrative is. And one of the main points of view that we have is kind of very similar to what James has said is, are we getting any additional insight or understanding here? Does this change our point of view on our business or our product or our feature or our users? And a great question to ask is always if someone said, hey, I need to know what percentage of people do this thing, it's always good to say, well, what if it's 100%? What will you do then? And what if it's 0%? And to work out, is that really a question that's going to lead to a change in either what we ship or what we experiment or what we want to achieve with our product. So we do a lot more talking before we do analysis to try and tease out if we're even going to do the right analysis. And similar to what James said, there's like a lot of different tools, and it's great. Interana provided like a centralized place for us, and that's really good because it kind of brings everyone to the same point of view. And if your point of view is you want to try and understand the user, then knowing what users are doing at an event level is a great place to start. And then you just build on top of that, and you build ideas and concepts on top of that. But for us, behavioral analytics is I know I would find it very hard to define that, but I would say for us it's about understanding what the story is and what the narrative is and what we want to do after we've told that story.
Like you both have kind of touched on doing and action, and I think that for me, a lot of the first level questions that people ask are usually, I can answer that, and that's cute trivia, if you will. But digging deeper gives you the actionable insight that allows you to actually change what you're doing and make business decisions in a more informed way.
Yeah. When I joined the OneDrive team, we have a data team which provides support and we can ask questions of. And the engagement model was, what's your question? What insight are you trying to learn? And to be honest, you don't know. You don't always know what you're trying to learn, right? It's the initial question might be the wrong question, or not the right focus. And so it's kind of actually being able to, the most powerful tools and the way to thinking about it is kind of what's the next question, what's the one after that, and being able to kind of, and we call it swimming in the data, so that you're not kind of rigidly stuck to this one question that you've asked, because inevitably normally it's the wrong one, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's almost like 100% the wrong one the first time you think about it. And I think when you have really fast tools, something that we've noticed is there is that kind of concept of, oh, hey, your data analysts or your data science are over here, and you got your PM here, and you got other parts of your business, and you go out and they say some stuff, and then they go back and do stuff. And that just wouldn't work at Reddit because we're too small, and we're all on the same floor pretty much. But something we've noticed is when you can go fast, wrapping up a data request in a ticket or an email is very limiting to the scope of that request. So something we do, because we can do a lot of things quick and really iteratively in Interana, is actually, instead of cutting a ticket, we ask people to cut a meeting, and we'll go in there for 30 minutes with like an first initial question, but then maybe there's a bunch of tangents, and there's a bunch of understanding that comes out of it. And maybe not all of it's useful, but it's almost guaranteed that you've gone a little bit further than that initial request. And one thing that, I think at Reddit, we really didn't invest a lot in data, so everything we learn now is like really interesting. And it's kind of hard to suggest that you'll know less about what you're trying to do the more data points you have, whether they're useful or not. If you can fit them into some sort of like framework of like, well, we know all these things about this particular side of the feature and this particular side of the feature, just knowing all those things and having that in your mind when you're moving through things, they can help you like jump quicker the next time when you have to go through your questions of like, okay, what should we ask, and like what should we try and analyze. And it's very, very rare that I would say an analysis is in vain, and it's something that I think should be, as much as like people say like A/B experiments don't always work out, it's the same with analysis, but you still learn something. And so I think you need to have like change your approach on like, this is a big time investment. It's not really. And like if you can do more and be faster, I think you're going to have more success.
So can you guys give us an example of an analysis that you've done that had interesting or surprising results?
I can start, yeah. So something we've always thought, or anecdotally, Reddit for a long time has been a pretty tough interface to deal with. I think that's putting it mildly. I'm glad to see there's some Redditors here. And like something we always thought is like that interface combined with the fact that it's pretty hard to understand what's going on. Reddit, there's like a lot of different communities. There's a lot of kind of stuff that's very, very specific to how you interact on Reddit. It led us to anecdotally believe that like for a lot of people it would take a long time for you to become one of those type of people who checked Reddit when they're like on the bus, like they get up in the morning at lunch. that could take an incredibly long amount of time. And what we've learned by investigating that user journey from like, hey, this is the first time we've seen that user and they're experiencing Reddit for the first time, is that there is like actually a sizable percentage who turned very quickly into like Redditors. And when we like dug into these users and we're trying to identify what is it about their experience that is different from everyone else's, we found repeatedly that they just almost through serendipity or like perseverance identified with communities and content that they just loved. So that's really changed a lot of our thinking about what we need to do to make Reddit better. And it's one of our goals to make it easier on Reddit to find the communities and the content that you love and to find discussions that you care about so that you can really understand and get the Reddit experience we want you to have.
And for us, we're always trying to find specific cohorts of users who do certain things in the product, because people are storing files and collaborating with, sharing stuff with other people. We looked at, I think in Canada you guys have a tax season, right, as well? Yeah, so same in the US, that's like it's January to April. And a lot of people store tax documentation in the service, right? So they collect all of their documentation up in the service. And it was just, I don't know if this was surprising, but probably just more fun that, we ran an experiment with a feature that was targeting the people that we thought would be interested in the tax-related feature. And we saw massive spikes towards the kind of the beginning of tax season of usage. And we cohorted those users as our kind of early filers. So I don't know if that applies to anybody in the room. And then it kind of went, it went down a little bit. There was a bit of a dip through February and March. And then suddenly, in April, there was like a massive spike towards kind of the deadlines where people were having a lot of activity and doing a lot of this kind of tax-related scenarios. So it's just kind of interesting to watch and observe the users. And then what we do is we take those users and we cohort them, and then we can understand them more and track them, what else are they doing in the service and how can we provide more tailored experiences that really, meet a specific need that they're looking for. And in that example, it's kind of helped me organize and get ready for tax season in a more efficient way.
Yeah, I think it's always great when your data kind of reflects real-world phenomena that you're like very, very associated with.
Yeah.
And something we noted was there's a game called Overwatch, which was going to be released towards the end of May. And when they released it, there was some issue on their site. They couldn't deliver the game. And for a brief period of time, I think about 2 hours, the Overwatch community on Reddit had more people on it than I think all of Reddit. And it was kind of like, it's a nice little positive control in your data and your analysis as well. You're like, well, that makes sense. And I actually buy a lot of what we do now.
Right. So you guys have both given us an example of kind of cohorting populations of people who either jump into the Reddit community very quickly versus not, or early tax filers versus me and the rest of the world. How are some of the other ways that you think about those particular groups of users or other groups of users and their longevity or their engagement? Like how do you measure whether it's straight up retention or engagement or lost users? How do you think about those particular measures?
Yeah, I think retention is just super important, and it's also really, really, really easy to understand. Anytime you see a very, very complex retention metric, it kind of makes me a bit worried because it's okay, is there something else going on here? So I think you should always operate with retention in mind, but I don't think that net retention necessarily speaks to engagement, or it depends on the metric that's in place. And for us, we really want to get people engaged, and we want to measure the quality of that engagement. And there's a lot of content on Reddit, there's a lot of comments, and I think for us, a big challenge for us, and I think a challenge around a lot of websites with a lot of text, is understanding reading time and that sort of passive consumption. So I think that's one of our big challenges, and I think understanding that more is really, really important to us. But we've developed a couple of strategies, but I think we have a lot of work to do there. So retention is really important, but it goes hand in hand with engagement. And for us, we kind of always think about retention at the top level, but for every feature, for every community, and maybe for every traffic source, we have a different concept of what we would like engagement to be for those users. And that's also important because we have totally different content in totally different communities. There's communities like Ask History, which is just entirely about in-depth discussions of historical happenings. We also have like communities that are entirely video-based or entirely GIF-based. So for us, our engagement metric changes depending on where we're looking and like what that community is and what they're trying to achieve and how they, I suppose, speak to the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think you look at your high-value scenarios, right? You figure out what customers really get out of your product or your service, and then you should figure out key things to measure that are related to that thing. And so for OneDrive, one of the key scenarios is sharing, because not only does it drive customer acquisition, but it also indicates that the existing customers are getting value out of the service. And so we'll take that very specific scenario and then try and measure it always from Sunday in different approaches. So that's kind of one way of thinking about it. And that's kind of applicable to everybody, right? Just know your kind of core scenarios and double down on measuring and understanding those particular users.
And I think it also comes down to the measurements themselves, right? The question that you answer is intimately informed by the data that you collect.
That's right, that's right. And another one for us is like collaboration. So as part of sharing, once you've shared, and the user comes back into the service and looks at, say, for example, an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or a PDF or whatever it is, what happens to that? And so then, we'll look at the graphs of those kind of actions and understand, who's a collaborator, who's actually working on stuff together, who's just reviewing, and it's kind of interesting to observe those particular cohorts of users over time as well.
And so your product is focused on how people share with each other. How do you view data and what you're learning from it and sharing that information across? Microsoft is a very enormous organization, but how do you think about sharing information, and how do you see analytics fitting into the communication?
Yeah, it's like 100,000 people at Microsoft, and so everybody's running around saying, I've got to be a growth person right now, and so everybody's measuring, everybody's getting into data, and it's great. But the challenge is like sharing all of that knowledge, right? So the way that we've done it is have kind of in each large group, which is kind of at the big group level. So OneDrive rolls up to a bunch of other groups. We'll have like a shared data team, which is kind of in place to provide tools and processes and the pipes and the cleanliness of the data, and they kind of are the arbiter across the broader organization. And they have like a longer term click where they'll kind of ingest product teams' data at the kind of the OneDrive level over time. And then that's useful, so if we want to understand what Skype is doing, for example, or if we're interested in the Office teams, particular scenarios, then we can kind of pipe that data in, take a spigot off of it, and then put it into our tools to kind of understand the insights there. And then, we'll also just do knowledge sharing, right? So there's a lot of emails and brown bags that go on around, here's this month's insights that we found, and the Skype team will share theirs, and the Office team will share theirs. We'll do the same as well. And then you kind of learn from that, and you see an interesting nugget of information, and you dive in, you get time with the team and the data scientists who created that insight, and learn more and see if you can apply it. And then at the OneDrive level, we have the team who's intimately familiar with our service and domain experts on our scenarios, and so it's important to have the kind of that level of granularity and understanding as well. So that's kind of how we structure things. And it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, so we're learning and improving that all the time.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really hard thing to do right. I think you have to constantly be evolving it as different teams take different steps with their relationship with data. Across Reddit, the data team, we want to talk to you if you're in trust and safety, community, marketing, sales, as well as if you're in product and engineering. So we definitely see like the scope of the company, and every team is generally on a different stage of their relationship with data. Some people are asking like, do I even have data? Like, is there anything? And some people are instrumenting, some people are understanding the kind of the nuances of their data. Some people are building metrics you hope that once that happens, people are operating against those metrics and then doing experiments and then trying to grow and trying to understand their product to a really, really deep level. For us, we have very similar, we have a data engineering team that handles the volume and the velocity of data. We have a bank of analysts and data scientists that help us dig in, and we also are like very, very indebted to this concept of like decentralizing stuff and decentralizing ability as often and as quickly as possible, so that your analysts and your data scientists can take that next step and then say, hey, like here's the next thing we should be learning. Here's the next thing we should be doing.
You've got to get to that self-service model, because otherwise it doesn't scale, right? You can't have all of the knowledge, especially around tools and how you get the insights. You can't keep that in one team, because the rest of the organization doesn't benefit from the knowledge. So we've tried to roll out tools and ways that other people can just rock up and start immersing themselves in the data with a little bit of training, and then eventually we'll take the training wheels off, and they're kind of more proficient and understanding stuff. And then when they're fully matured, and running their own experiments, and they actually come back and teach us stuff, which is kind of cool to see. That's like the success. Yeah. Great, you graduated.
Yeah, it's very much the case, because if you have a tool and you have great instrumentation, the people who know the product best are going to actually do the best analysis. It's actually quite rare that your analyst or your data scientist is going to be able to understand whatever tool or product it is to such a deep level that their analysis is somehow groundbreaking and wow, we never thought of that. It's usually pretty much going to come from the people who are day in, day out working with that tool or working with that product. Something that's also important to us is, on the other side, you're asking engineers and you're asking developers to do a lot of work to enable those experiments. So we very much value the concept of the person who launches an experiment also owns the completion of that experiment and disseminating those results. And we've even taken steps so that in our dev console, when you're actually building things within Reddit, we'll actually have a little marker saying, hey, 40% of users actually end up here, and here's some links to the experiments we've run recently, so that people throughout the entire organization understand that their contribution matters, and it's not just you launch an experiment as an engineer and you walk away. We want the people who enable these things to care as much about the results as the people who want to run the experiments.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see empowered engineers wanting to get customer feedback and iterating fast. That's kind of pretty fulfilling.
Yeah, and I would say one of the great advantages I think Reddit has is that we get a lot of feedback from our users, and we get it fast and we get it direct, to the extent that parts of the code are open source and people fix bugs. So I think when you want to go fast with experiments, there's this kind of this trade-off of is it statistically sound in terms of its analysis, and is it designed well, and do you actually learn anything from it? Because as someone who I would categorize myself as a recovering academic, there is a point where you just do experiments for the sake of experiments. And if you ever see a team or someone who's okay, our OKR is 5 experiments this quarter, it's hey, that doesn't make any sense. Right. What are you actually trying to achieve? It's really, really important.
And what's the impact to your customers?
Absolutely.
So we're close on time, so I'm going to say thank you very much. I think that we had some time set aside for questions, but it did not occur to me to ask about the logistics of that. So there we are.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I need some traction. You need some traction.